Welcome to the V2V podcast. I am Alexei, and I am interviewing today Scientology survivor Marcus Parrish. Hi, Marcus. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good, thanks, man. So I guess I'd like to start by asking you how you define Scientology. What is Scientology?
Okay, it's kind of a big question.
Yeah.
But because it's many things to many people in a lot of ways. But essentially, what Scientology is I have to put this in quotes, a religion that was developed in the 50s by a pulp science fiction author named L. Ron Hubbard. And there are some stories stating that it was a bet between the author Ray Bradbury, famous for Fahrenheit 451, the dystopian novel,
Right.
and Hubbard, about whether or not Hubbard could create a religion based on his science fiction work. And Bradbury's like, you'll never be able to do it. And they made like $1 bet that he couldn't, and then he proceeded to do just that, and basically, won. So the whole premise of Scientology to begin with is a little iffy. Like, is it even sincere? Is it just the product of a handshake between two authors testing each other about the limits of their influence over people? So what he came up with was this. He wrote a book called Dianetics,
Right.
back in 1950, I believe. And the idea was that our brains are filled with these objects, like called engrams, and they create all of the problems that we face emotionally, mentally, physically, and they're put there by negative things that happen in the world, like memories, but they take this weird physical form and stick around, and and then cause problems later on when they're triggered.
Right.
And other events recall like past traumas, and they kind of spring back to life and cause all kinds of like chaos in your life. So, based on that premise, the idea is to clear these things out of your mind, these literally physical things that are causing so much pain and destruction in your life, from your brain, so that you can be clear. Clear of all of these engrams that are populating your body and mind. And the way to do that is to take part in what's called auditing, which sounds it sounds like what it is. It's basically doing kind of an inventory of your past, and with an auditor, just like the IRS. They come in and take an account of all of your receipts and say, okay, this is good. Okay, that's not. We'll put that aside. What's this about? On a financial basis, but we're talking about like in your head. So
So it's kind of like psychoanalysis?
It's very similar, without any of the professional guidance that would kind of go along with psychoanalysis. An auditor isn't like a therapist in any sense. What
Right.
the auditor does is they kind of take you back along your timeline from really like pre-birth. Like they'll have you go back and recall traumatic experiences that have occurred before you were even born, and really before you even existed. Like past life stuff comes into play too. And so far what I'm talking about isn't there's not judgment thus far in my explanation of this. I'm trying to be pretty objective about what they really believe and how this is supposed to really work. So this is all taken kind of at face value, and the way that happens, the way that you go and do it in an auditing session is there's a device called an e-meter, and what it is kind of 2/3 of a lie detector test. You hold on to 2 wired up soup cans in each hand that are connected to a electronic meter that gauges like galvanic response, like sweating, pressure, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And there's a little dial that like swings back and forth that is supposed to tell the auditor information about how you're reacting to whatever is being presented. And it's, like I said, it's strictly the auditees, it's all everything that's being said and everything that's being discussed is being originated from the person holding the cans. It's not like you're not being prompted really about like specific things. It's just like the auditor will see the needle move on the dial and say, "Hey, what was that?" Like, I just saw something. What's that? And then the person is supposed to reflect on it and divulge it. That's the very important part where you want to tell all of the bad stuff to the other person, because only that and over and over and over again, by the way, too, until there's no longer a reaction.
Right.
And that, in effect, is supposed to be clearing out this negativity in your head, these engrams, engrams, that exist in your body.
Is there any science? Is there any science to these machines that they're using? The 2/3 of a lie detector test, and what's missing in the lie detector test? What's
You kind of got me on that one. It's I believe like that what's missing is like the portion that actually gives you a readout, like the graph itself. Like you can't go back and look at the evidence of the auditing session. There are notes taken by the auditor, but there's not the process of actually delivering any results.
Right. Okay.
So as you're doing this, well, let me go back a little bit. The science that you're talking about, there is, I don't know if you've ever seen like at a state fair or some kind of like public gathering, like like an e-meter demonstration. So the way the way it's shown is that you come up and you hold on to the cans, and like someone will like say pinch your arm, and you'll see the needle fly over to the right, like whoa, like there's a reaction, like and you can see it, and like oh, I pinch your arm, and look, there's the reaction on the dial. Clearly, the pinch of your arm made that needle like move. Right? So that's you're like, oh yes, of course, I see that. And then what you do is you remain holding the cans and think about your arm being pinched. And hey, look at that, there's the needle, it's moving again. So there's a correlation right there. Like, oh, clearly just the thought of your arm being pinched has a physiological reaction.
Right.
And that's pretty much the beginning and the end of the quote-unquote science that is in place. It's
right, okay.
And everything kind of is based on that. Like, oh, it's clearly like a sting in your head, like that made that happen. So, I mean, essentially that's it. Like, it's really that simple in a lot of ways. So what it became is a system kind of based around those principles that the negative things happen, it results in these objects being getting populated in your body and mind, and that Dianetics/Scientology can remove these so you can become clear of these negative effects.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
And it sounds pretty like, I don't know, like doesn't sound certainly like dangerous or harmful.
It's not sinister, no. It doesn't sound too sinister at this point, no.
No, and it was quite popular actually for a while.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the 50s were like all over this because it was like a new thing. It was psychotherapy was fairly popular, but this made it even more convenient, easier.
Yeah.
There was nobody to like say otherwise in a lot of ways.
Right.
So yeah, it like kind of took off. Many copies of that book were sold.
Yes, indeed. So I'm going to ask you now kind of how you got into it. And
sure,
how that happened.
Right. So now we're talking, many decades later. I was a 19-year-old kid in college looking for some part-time work. Found an ad for a teacher's aide at this school called Ability Plus. And there was nothing seemingly weird about it. And until I got to the school itself, which was on a middle school campus that had been out of use for about a year, so it was empty.
Where was it?
This was in Orange, California.
Okay, and it was empty.
Middle of Orange County.
Okay.
So
and it was empty.
Well, it was empty other than like 4 buildings that had been leased by this company. On this campus. It's like this campus that could hold like 1,000 kids, and I think there were like 50 kids or so in this particular little private school.
Okay.
So that wasn't, necessarily that weird, but there was just a very strange kind of like vibe about the whole thing. Like there's way too much room, and why would you even want to rent like a place like that? And I think later on I discovered that it was really about the appearance of legitimacy. Like it's an actual school, we're you know, it's a school campus and we're a school, so therefore cool, everything's fine.
Right.
So immediately I discovered that the way that this school was teaching their kids was a little odd. And what I mean by that was they were using something that I didn't understand at the time called it was called like Hubbard Learning Technology, right? And and what it involved was when you're reading something, when like you're reading a textbook, and you find yourself getting bored or frustrated or tired or anything that is like pulling you away from what you're reading, what that means according to this philosophy of teaching is that somewhere back along the way you missed a word, you misunderstood the meaning of a word, like you skipped something or you didn't understand something. So the remedy for that is to go back, like you scan back to where you think you started feeling funny. And then go word by word until you find the word that you don't understand. Right? And then you crack open your dictionary and look up the definition of that word and then write out the definition of that word. And then continue your studies. So I was like, that's really intensive. Like that seems like it would become like...
How often were kids like admitting to doing that and that was happening? Like how often was that happening in the classroom?
All the time.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
And the teachers and then me, you know, as like a helper in the classroom would be watching for like distracted kids, right? Like, okay, hey, what's your misunderstood word? Go back and check, you know. Go back and like recheck this. So although these kids were definitely learning the definition of a lot of words, it became clear that this was a very tedious way to read. Later on, I discovered why this is important. But at the time, you know, as a 19-year-old kid, I was in school myself. I was open to new ideas. It didn't seem it seemed weird, but it didn't seem like anything that was like necessarily harmful.
And
these were nice kids. Go ahead.
Were you being paid?
Oh yeah. It was like a legitimate, like, you know, it was a legitimate job. Like I got a real paycheck and So what I didn't really understand was that I was also being watched, and this was really part of a grooming process that I was going through, and I didn't really realize this. So the kids were all kind of odd too. They were all like a little bit too bright-eyed, a little bit too extroverted. Like these were kids in any other circumstance who would be like the obnoxious, like you're really kind of weird kid in a regular setting. But they were all like that, so it was all like kind of normalized. I didn't get that either until later. So what I found out, I'll jump ahead a little bit, but what I found out was going on was that the kids, me, the teachers themselves, were all under kind of a spell. Like, it was basically what was going on was hypnosis. By means of repeating like the same suggestion over and over and over again. Like, And this becomes more important when you're after you're leaving the world of regular academics, and and then you start doing this with Scientology literature. Like it becomes that's the process that I'm talking about as far as grooming, because when you start doing that with Hubbard's literature about the process of doing Scientology and reading these courses that you're presented with, that word definition thing, and then going back and over and over and over again really becomes much more important as far as ingraining the system of belief into people without them even realizing it's happening. So right. So I'm going along, and it's been a couple of months doing this. I'm still doing my thing in school, and the job is, fine. I'm also doing like kind of a physical education part of that too, where I'm taking the kids out for exercise, and we're playing games and doing stuff. And sure. So one day, I'm like suddenly approached, and this is like out of nowhere. Like these women showed up, like, and it turns out that some of them were like parents of the children. Yeah. Who were like at the very oldest, like 2 years my junior, down to like 5 or 6 year olds. So it was like 50 kids with an age range of like 5 to 17. Okay. And so, and there's this concept that's somewhat prevalent in I forget what they're called. Like I think Church of God. It's a cult. Okay. Which it is indeed what we're talking about. Like Scientology as it developed definitely turned into what would be commonly known and practiced as a cult, without question. Yes. So there's this concept that this other religious cult has called flirty fishing. Okay. Where these women go out into the world to find new recruits by in their case, like offering sexual services. Right. This wasn't quite that, but it was close. Right. They were being incredibly flattering, and they were like, it was like I was attacked by like a bunch of cougars. Right. Like, what is going on? Bunch of milk. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you're really cool, and we like to show you more, where what you're doing and this, because they were asking me a lot about the study technology. Even the terminology is weird, but and how I liked it and how I liked the job, and we'd like to show you more, and maybe have you do something more valuable, more important with us. Okay. I'm like, all right, I'm game, sure, why not? At this point, I had no clue about any of this stuff. Of course, you're 19 and you're 19 and these girls are hot. Yeah, or these women are hot. They were women. They were like 30, 40 year old women. I'm like, all right. Why not? And so what happened next was I went to this like compound pretty close to, where I was. There was a few cities over in Irvine, California.
Okay.
And it's just this like little complex of buildings on a, suburban city street, looking like totally innocuous, and there's a lobby, and there are people behind like desks, like cubicles, like registrars, basically is what they are. And they're calling themselves like counselors. So what you do is you go fill out a 200 question personality test. Which was, as I found out later, developed by a Scientologist, and it's called the Oxford Capacity Analysis, which has nothing to do with Oxford. There's nothing to do with anything scientific. It's just a series of very personal questions, and what that
could you give me
one? Go ahead.
Could you give me an example of one?
Oh, I mean, just like basically like, do you ever feel depressed? Like, have you ever stolen anything? Or, is your outlook on life like generally good? And, you answer these questions. I believe there's a range, like 1 to 5 or something along those lines. I could be wrong about that. And I'm recollecting back, but it's a lot of questions, and some of them are repeated. And basically, what it does is it gives the registrar kind of a snapshot of you and your attitudes in that given moment. And what it's used for are 2 things. One, it's so that they can look at you, because these are your answers. They can look at you and say, "Oh, here's everything that's wrong with you." Yeah, clearly, you said so yourself. And the good news is that we here at the church can help you. We can solve all these problems, or you can continue to live this miserable life of yours. And I'm like, I didn't even know I was miserable. What are you talking about? Yeah. And they're like, well, no, you're not. You're not miserable, but we can still help you with all this stuff. I'm like, this is kind of interesting so far. Like, okay, like, still like no real big red flags or anything like that. I was curious for sure. And so then they wanted me to spend $40. So I'm like, all right, for what? For this introductory like communications course, as it was called. Okay. So the way that worked was they partner you up with this other person, and they call that person your twin, and they seat you face to face in chairs, like pretty close, like with your knees like a foot away from each other, like right up facing each other in chairs, and you do these routines called training routines, or as they're called TRs, and and you take turns doing, like, one as the teacher and the student, and they're kind of intentional exercises where, say for instance, there's a book is placed on the ground, and when it's my turn to teach, I will look at you and clearly demand that you pick up that book. And a few moments go by and you don't pick up the book, and I say, flunk, right? Like you didn't do it. And so I repeat the command, pick up that book. And I do that until you pick up the book, and then you pass. And then it's your turn to do that with me. They're like, one of the exercises is basically a staring contest. Whoever blinks first loses. Things of that nature. And there are, I think, 40 of these routines that you do back and forth.
Okay.
And you're doing this for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So this too, as it turns out, is and this is even mentioned in the literature. The idea is that you're put into a light trance, and it definitely changes your perspective without you kind of realizing it. Because when I was done with this kind of grueling exercise later in the afternoon, I felt like I was high. Like,
yeah,
all of the colors of the world were a little brighter. I felt like I was walking with a little more bounce in my step. Like, I felt good.
Yeah.
Like, and of course I correlated that with what I just done, and then I was validated for that. Like, yes, you're the man. Like, absolutely. Like, we've never seen anyone have better results. Like stuff like that. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then they're like, well, would you like to, continue doing this stuff? I'm like, well, sure, but like, I'm just a 19-year-old college kid with a part-time job that I still hadn't really connected yet. Like,
have you been like read any rules yet of the church or any of that, or?
Oh no, we're not there yet at all. Like,
Okay.
I mean, okay, so at this point, I'm like a client, right? Like, I'm a customer.
Yeah.
So whatever was going on, this was still kind of being shown to me as a really cool, like, philosophy or curriculum that was definitely designed to make me the best person that I could be. Like, this is like, I'm like, all right, it seems like kind of reasonable, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely feel good.
Yeah.
So the next thing was, is that these same women, and some other people at this point, like, because now I'm being more introduced to the people at the church, and they're like, hey, why don't you work here instead? It's better money, and I think we think that you do a good job at this place as basically a staff recruiter.
Okay.
Well, or like kind of like a mid-level or lower level, like, human resources person. Like, you can, there's an opening.
Yeah.
and like, cool. I'm like, all right. Because like the whole point was like, it's work. This is interesting. It doesn't seem to be negative in any sense. So I was like, all right, this sounds like something I'd totally be willing to do.
Sure.
Let's. I'm gonna stop recording and take a quick break.
Okay, man.